Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and the Bast Gold market. We're going to get into all of that stuff and more. I'm your host, Beechek. I'm joined by my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. And before we get into everything from over the weekend, just a reminder that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is incredibly risky. We do not know anything for sure, so please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Monday. It is the 22nd of April. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM. I am back from the spa. Spent the last couple of days farming Bast Gold in a different location. And it's good to be back at the home base. I'm ready for the week. I think it's going to be a pretty insane week. We will have, obviously, the Bast Gold distribution happening, but we'll also have the first full week of Rune's trading after the BTC halving event. So quite a lot of things to pay attention to this week.
So much stuff to pay attention to. Glad you mentioned the runes, because that whole stuff went on over the weekend. So we're definitely going to touch on that as part of today's show. Sammy, just to check in with you first, how are you doing? How are you feeling as we start the new week?
I'm good. I'm a little bit disconnected from the rune stuff. I had my head, similar to Legendary, had my head down in Blast. So I've seen a few announcements which seem pretty bullish, but outside of that, it's kind of we're getting into that segmented attention where we're kind of focusing on our own little niches. So it's interesting to see that develop.
Indeed. Well, we're going to touch on all of it in just a little bit. So let's get into the headlines first to set us up to figure out what is going on in the past 24 hours. As always, this news comes to you from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. Just going to share it for the people watching on screen. Going to read it out for the people listening in on X. Let's get into it, starting with some crypto price action. We have Bitcoin up 1% at 65.9K, ETH up 1% at 3.2K, Solana up 1% at $153. Getting into the headlines, Runestone's tumble to 0.03 Bitcoin, and Satoshi Nakamoto seems to be the early winner with a gate listing. We're going to touch on some of that action in just a little bit. Number two, the Blast L2 gold distribution is revealed with 10 million more gold available for distribution. I'm going to put that down for you in just a little bit. Share some takes from the timeline. FD stats with us. We're going to go through one of his initial takes as well as hearing from our own co-hosts. And finally, Pac-Man is in another Beeple every day as price increase 0.08 on Blast Gold anticipation. Getting into some notable sales, Xcopy is still electric, to be completely honest. An Algo Bro edition sold for 10.269 ETH, and an edition called Xcopy The State of Us sold for 50 ETH. In terms of NFT floor prices, we've got CryptoPunks down 1% at 39, Bored Apes at 12.2, so recovered from their lows in the 10 ETH region. Mutants up 15% to 2.3 ETH. DGods at 1.4, Captains at 3.4, Azuki's at 3.9, Penguins at 10.3. Mad Lads suddenly at 106. Solana had to double take there to see that big decline. It might only be down 3% in 24 hours, but there's been a clear sell-off there. And the Nouns winning bid was at 8 ETH. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Before we get into a bigger discussion on those and the big discussion topic for the day, anything in particular that is catching your attention?
Probably the Mutants having that strong run up, the 16% that you just mentioned that they're up. Also kind of contrasting that the Bored Apes haven't moved as much over the last 24 hours. They actually are down like 0.6%. But seeing that Mutant run is quite interesting.
I completely agree. I mean, what do you prescribe this to? I'm just sharing the video for the people watching in. A real big bounce. I mean, Mutants had gone down beneath 2 ETH for a period of time. Bored Apes were flirting with single digits. In fact, I'm pretty sure there were a few sales in that single digit region as well. What are you putting this down to, Legendary?
I think that the mutant recovery is just following the Bored Ape recovery per se, and also like having the lower floor price is just easier for that collection to pump than for the apes.
Yeah, I wonder whether, I mean, you know how we've been speaking recently how every pump is sold into, like every single time something good comes out on the timeline about basically any collection. Remember it was Zuki with anime chain and people thinking, oh, well, maybe the token's coming soon with the anime token, or Mockaverse with the Mocka token. Every time like another detail comes, it's like up 6% or something, up 5%. And then just give it a couple of days and it'll be down the same amount again. Interesting to see here whether this can be sustained. Sammy, what about from your perspective? What's catching your attention?
I think mine's a little bit more left field. So Fantasy Tops are minting soon, which is a game on Blast, and they've got a significant amount of Blast funding or Bast Gold allocation. So I think there's a lot of attention that's going to be on that. There's been quite a few KOLs, influencers, however you want to call them, kind of getting involved in that. And I think some guys deposited 40 ETH. Saw that on the timeline recently, which was interesting. So there's some players going to be going after that, and it'll be interesting to see what. So I never played the testnet, so I'm going in blind, but it seems to be a lot of hype, and I've been following the likes of Apex and a few of the Wolfsdown people who have been talking about it as well. So it'll be interesting when that kicks off and what these high valued cards are going to be coming out at.
Interesting. Okay, so we're definitely going to talk about that more with respect to the kind of SocialFi focus for Blast Season 2, because that does seem to be something which people want to prioritize, or maybe that's what the team want, like the direction that they want to push us in. So I'll definitely hear from you more from that perspective. I'm just looking at the Mintify heat map for Blast NFTs, and I did see a little sentence, maybe we'll talk about this later too, but now that we're here, just taking a look, there seemed to be some kind of allusion to NFTs and coins on Blast getting some type of reward via some type of mechanism yet to be confirmed. So I'm just checking out what kind of NFTs and prices we have on the Blast NFTs. And it seems like we've got Crypto Valleys at 0.15, Blaster Keys selling for 0.55, New Blast City 0.02, Blastopians. That was one of the kind of, if there was one that captured people's attention in the beginning, that I think was one of them. That's a 0.05. I'm trying to find those cats, Pluto cats, because they'd managed to run up to as high as 1.5 ETH, I think, at one point in time, because they had a lot of gold attached to that project. Can't find it in a moment. Let me put it in here. Just while I do that, Legendary, do you have any reflection on the kind of NFT side on Blast?
Yeah, I think it's something we've seen teased since the first Bast Gold drop, that there will be a mechanism to reward both NFT as well as ERC20 holders. And it just makes sense now that we have a bit more speculation and teasing on that again, that we see that speculation being reflected in some of the NFT collections.
Okay, so yeah, these Pluto cats are 1.24 floor, pretty expensive, like if you think about it. But I'm sure, I remember people at the time that they came out, people were doing calculations as to what gold might be worth, therefore what might these be worth. I'm sure someone, well, we always assume that someone's done the calculations, but to command such a high price relative to other things, I'm almost certain people have done the math there. I actually hold a couple of these as well, which I think I bought it around this price, and maybe another a little bit higher too. So interesting stuff there. Let's get into the discussion topic for the day, which is twofold. And this is before we get to the Bast Gold, before we get to the runes, which is all coming. So stay tuned for that in just a little bit. Just a reminder, we're on video as well for the people who are just listening in and might want to check us out on YouTube or on X video too. We had this really, really bad scam yesterday or the day before, and I typically, sometimes I know we get a bit immune to the scams and I don't always even mention them, or I might mention them and then we just kind of move on really quickly. But I thought this was an interesting one because it relates to, I felt like there was a learning there for people who are involved in the space more generally, and thought there was something to kind of take away from this for people who are investors as well. This was the tweet by DCF God, who was explaining, I think, roughly what happened with this Z Casino, ZK, I don't know how to pronounce it, Z Casino launch, where they said they were going to launch their own chain. They had told people that they were going to convert ETH, that they would get their ETH back 1-to-1. So like you give them ETH, you will then return, you'll get ETH returned whenever they're ready to launch. What they did is that without asking anyone or telling anyone, they just converted $30 million worth of bridged ETH to their native token. It's pretty outrageous. And the way that it's said by the founder was, this is better than a pre-sale. Our new L2 chain goes live in 30 days. You can farm tokens by bridging early, send funds from Ethereum mainnet. And this is what they said: all funds can be bridged back 1-to-1 in 30 days. And I think like people were absolutely, completely confused as to how it was possible that someone could just not give the ETH back and instead change it to this gas token, which I guess was supposed to be used on this chain. And I think the learning from this, or at least a reflection from DCF God, which I wanted to discuss with you guys before we get into the main headlines today, was he said this. I said, I don't think you all realize most angel investors are just like the rest of the apes on this website. Saying Pentoshi or whoever funded ZK Casino is responsible for the team being scammers is reaching. They likely got scammed too, and not just money, but on their brand as well. Perhaps they were even more inclined to trust a deposit as they want to support their investments. Clicking sign on DocuSign is just as much effort as clicking swap on Uniswap. Individual angels aren't spending hundreds of hours scrutinizing the teams. Often they're actually investing off FOMO due to a DM like, hey, we raised 5 million from Sequoia A16Z and at closing in 35 seconds, sign or miss out. I think it's written in a slightly sensational way to try to make the point. But Legendary, I want to come to you here first to get your thoughts on this particular straight up scam and just the kind of implication and the thought process for how people might read other investors as signs for whether to invest or not.
Yeah, I'll comment more on the investment side of things. I do think that Sammy also has a pretty good take on the actual scam. Cool. And that Cigar had a great point on that too that he will reference. On the investment side of things, if you look at people like Dingaling, who basically on every single pitch deck, I think Dingaling said that they did between 100 and 150 investments in I think in this cycle. I don't know if it's this and the last cycle together, but it also doesn't really matter. The gist is that nobody has time to read the documents, to do the due diligence, especially if you are someone who invests very, very broadly and you basically are spraying paint on the wall and see what sticks. And you do small ticket sizes. If you have bigger KOLs throwing around 5K per ticket and they're happy to do 100 of those tickets, it doesn't really matter if 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them are scams, or just go like straight to zero, because putting in the due diligence to analyze all those 100 projects and then decide in which you're going to invest, it's just too much of an opportunity cost when you can use your capital and time in a wiser way. So if you're investing in stuff and you see, oh, Dingaling is in and that KOL is in, I wouldn't take any note of that. And when it comes to my own investment decision, I'd honestly be more surprised if a round doesn't have Dingaling on the slide, for example, because it's in all of them, and it kind of is becoming a requirement to have a certain set of KOLs on that list. And that also goes for centralized exchanges, obviously, when it comes to token listing, that they do like to see some prominent investors backing that as one of the many criteria when it comes to the token listing. But it's not a good guide when it comes to your own personal investment decision. And when it comes to my investment style, I would say that smaller tickets, I'm the same. I don't really read what's going on there, and I'm happy to deploy a bit into a smaller ticket. If I do go for a larger ticket, I would do my due diligence on that and have maybe have a bit more of a sophisticated investment thesis, or have an investment thesis and have had a look at the round. But if it's a smaller ticket, I like don't fucking care and just gonna ape in.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really helpful conversation to have out loud. I don't know how many people are openly kind of having that conversation. Rune Lord in the comments on YouTube said as well, embarrassing to admit this, but that is exactly how I invested in the Portal, Angel. And the thing is, you're not necessarily going to stop doing that, because at least a proportion of the time you do that, it's going to work out pretty well. So look, I think it's useful to have that conversation. It's risky. Sometimes it will work out well. You took the risk. Sometimes it won't work out well. And as I think the key point Legendary said was, there's an opportunity cost when the market gets so hot and your time and attention gets so difficult to manage, that sometimes you do genuinely just think, well, okay, how much is the ticket? Is it 1K? Is it 2K? Okay, just take it. I think, you know, from a headline perspective, it seems okay. And then you take the risk. So this is just one of the things that people need to bear in mind, that the names on the ticket doesn't necessarily mean like an endorsement. You know, it's not a perfect endorsement. So I think it's helpful to have that conversation out loud. Sammy, I know you wanted to give some more context on what happened here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Legendary was saying around the due diligence angle. Sometimes it's hard to find time to do that. I do think the beauty of being a midfluencer is you don't necessarily put your name to a lot of stuff, or it's not public, so you are able to do that, and it's your own risk. Whereas I think some of the bigger KOLs, I mean, they have followings, and people will necessarily kind of follow them for that. So I think they should theoretically do a little bit more consideration, but I get that people are very time constrained, etc. I know that on the due diligence side, Saigar had a post yesterday saying that the tech that they were basing that casino on wasn't even ZK tech. They spun the chain up in a couple of minutes. So it's just, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily clock that because I'm not a technical guy. I've got a basic understanding, but I think you get a general consensus as to how these guys are operating. You'll get a bad feel. And I think I'd personally go off that bad feel to then look to do something further. But it is sometimes very difficult when you see all these big names that are backing it. You assume they've done their due diligence, but when you start peeling back the covers, it's pretty clear that everyone is time constrained and they do have a lot of capital, and it is just kind of spray and pray. Especially with these earlier rounds, they're high risk. Some of them won't hit. And I think the current market is that they are hitting pretty well. It's died off a little bit, but I can see why people continue to do it the way they are at the moment. But I think over the next couple of months or 6 months or so, it's probably going to change, especially as you get a lot more cash grabs coming into the space.
Yeah, and I think people are going to get pretty annoyed. So wait, I'll come to that in a second. But Saigar, you mentioned Saigar's tweet. I'm showing that for the people watching in. He said the funniest part of I don't know if it's that funny, but the funniest part of the Z Casino drama is that the chain they released has no ZK tech in it at all, nor does it use EigenDA. It's an Arbitrum Nitro chain that took 2 minutes to deploy. They put zero effort into scamming everyone. As you said, if you're not a technical person, I don't know if it would ever be something that you'd be able to check that type of thing. But damn, what an egregious way to scam people and think you're going to get away with it. I've seen that the person's already been doxxed, and I don't like, okay, this is not, I don't know if this is funny or it's not funny. Someone who was scammed, a prominent person who was scammed as part of this thing, shared a message from a chat where the Chinese Telegram of this project had to get shut down because people were trying to hire hitmen to figure out who this person was and where they were going. And it's like, okay, on some level that's funny because it's like, wow, this kind of escalated quickly. But at the same time, like we are in the Wild West in this space. Like we really, really are. And if people think that they're going to be able to just walk away and disappear into the sunset with this type of thing, I don't know that you would be able to trust the other people in this space to kind of let you do that. Like, and I think the more we get into this kind of very, very hot environment where there's like loads of money at stake, yes, there's going to be more scams, but like this is just a clear example of just like wild escalation of the legitimate danger of what some of this stuff or what people might be willing to do in these like more serious situations. Like you can't do what this person did. Such an egregious, obvious scam, which, you know, to some extent, I want to kind of make it distinguish this in some way. You know how people call the pre-sale a scam, right? Like, but on some level, when you're doing the pre-sale, like you are choosing to throw money kind of down the toilet. Like, yeah, they're supposed to make the coin, but that like at least there's something in that where it's like, well, you are being really, really degenerate, and therefore you can almost take some ownership of your decision. Where, okay, the person didn't do what they're supposed to do, but you did just give a random person a bunch of money to do a pre-sale. This, in my opinion, I want to see if you guys think the same. This, in my opinion, is way worse because it was a straight up lie at the beginning to say that, okay, we're going to swap. You can put in your ETH, you will be able to get your ETH back, and then you just don't get it, and then they pretend like it's completely fine. Legendary, do you like? Is my reading of that situation fair? What do you make of the kind of rapid escalation of these types of things?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by the rapid type of escalation, having been in crypto for a couple of years. Like, you are in a space where so many people are anonymous, have money, are not really used to consequences. So when they get scammed and trying to find a hitman is certainly nothing that surprises me any longer, as sad as that might sound. In terms of qualifying, what is the worst scam? Is it Machi raising 30 mil for a meme coin and making people hope that it will pump based off that meta, or is it someone like that person straight off lying when they're building their C casino? I don't really know what the worst scam is. I don't think that we have like the benchmarks in place to qualify that, and I don't even think that we need to like differentiate what is worse, what is better, because at the end of the day, all of those things, whether it's like a pre-sale scam, someone raising and then accidentally or not accidentally burning the money, burning the LPs, straight out scamming, is all the same. Nothing really starts from a place of a good intention.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fair. I think it's fair. I guess it's my legal brain kind of thinking about it from a legal perspective, where you're always trying to tease out the nuance in it, and in terms of the language, I think it was probably slightly distinct. But I take your point. Both of them are basically ridiculous. Okay, that's that. I thought it'd be interesting to touch on that because I think we will see many more things of of that nature, and so I think it's helpful to have that conversation. But we want to move into the title of the show, as well as get into some Rune stuff a little bit later too. We want to talk about Bast Gold. We want to talk about Bast Gold Distribution 2. I'm going to set it up for discussion. Then we're going to talk about our own personal strategies, how we're thinking about it, and the key reactions to this second distribution. Just for a bit of context, Bast Gold is obviously one of the currencies attached to the Blast L2, which is being delivered by the team that delivered Blur, the main NFT marketplace, or at least that was the main NFT marketplace on ETH. It is a very prized asset because it's worth about 35,000 points, I believe. And people think that if you farm sufficient gold, you will get a very, very juicy airdrop relatively soon as we move into May. So that's the game that people are playing. I think Cyrus tweeted again over the weekend, one of the most prominent traders, that it's just like a hyper bullish tweet again. A lot of people are very bullish on this. So that's the background. Here's the update. 10 million gold will be given to dApps on Blast next week. We've introduced a new incentive weight for this distribution, and we're sharing this criteria in advance so dApps can improve their incentive design ahead of time. Separate from dApp Gold distributions, gold will be allocated to token and NFT projects on Blast via a new mechanism in the near future. That's what I referenced at the top of the show. It seems like there will be a little bit more of a focus at some point in time, maybe not immediate, for actual NFT holders and token holders on Blast, which is separate to the kind of using the dApps as you go about. A bit more context. dApps live on mainnet were weighted based on the following formula. basically they were kind of put into different weights. Spot dexes were at the top, SocialFi next, lending next. I'll just give you a quick update of some of what the top ones were. Incentive weight. The incentive weight assesses dApp's effectiveness in distributing gold to users rated from 0 to 1. Ahead of the distribution, we're highlighting common issues so dApps can refine their incentives and achieve full scores. I don't know how many of these things we need to literally read through as well. But maybe, oh, where's the list gone? The list is not here. That's a shame. Legendary. What's your reflection? I'm going to find the actual list of the main dApps that got the most. First question for you. What's your reflection on this 10 million gold, and any thoughts on how to apply your actions moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm very happy with the gold distribution when it comes to my own personal farming. I think the biggest alpha when it comes to those distributions is to like not follow the same guides that everyone is posting on X, and do your Thrustify, do your Juice Finance, your Wasabi, all of them being good gold farms. But I think the true alpha is in trying to find projects that haven't received gold yet and will be included in the next gold distribution, and kind of speculate on them before others will do. Probably one of the biggest winners of that is Kettle Finance, that RWA marketplace where you can lend and borrow against tokenized luxury watches. It is the first gold distribution. They will receive 180k gold. You basically could have farmed points on there by just offering loans against luxury watches in a blur-like fashion. So take the same amount of gold and offer it to 30 loans, which is something that I've been doing over the last week, and managed to basically spend $0 and get to top 15 on the leaderboard. And obviously, once the Bast Gold distribution went live and that figure of 180k transpired, the amount of loan offers and bids and everything like 10x'd on there. So I do think you can do very well by farming existing platforms, farming YOLO, Cambria, whatever it is that you like. But I also do think that it's really worth to look for new things that aren't really talked about that much on the timeline, because that's obviously the true alpha that people are less willing to share. Like, you have to basically put yourself into the perspective of someone who, finds a platform like that. If they share that and they go viral, they're going to dilute themselves. If someone shares another guide on Thruster or on Cambria or on YOLO, that's already being farmed. It's good for the views, it's good for engagement, but doesn't really add any new info. Obviously, that's also a very risky part, because this is how you run into platforms that just are spinning up and turn out to be a scam. But I think it's worthwhile, if you really want to take that seriously, to at least allocate a smaller part of your capital to play around with some of the new things coming out.
That's a great point. And this is the key reason why I think you're actually very, very good at this game, whether it's Blast or whether it's other stuff. It's the curiosity and the willingness to go out and just do new stuff. And this is why, relative to you, but also in general, other people, including myself, are worse at it. Apologies. Because it's so easy to just get comfortable. Like, I bet how much would everyone just absolutely love it if you could just go to Juice, put your ETH in, and then cook? Like, obviously that's what everyone wants, right? Everyone wants for there to be one place. Just go to Wasabi, put your ETH in, lend it, and just print gold. And obviously that's never the case. It's the easiest thing will never be the best strategy. Now, look, maybe if you've got tons of ETH, tons of capital, yes, you'll still make a healthy return, most likely. But you're in competition with all the other lazy capital, which is the majority of capital, because most people just want to dump it somewhere and earn points. So the fact that you are continuously experimenting, I think, is to your great credit, and that's why you do so well in these types of things. So that's one thing for sure. Sammy, you shared this graph, which I think would be helpful to talk through. Do you want to speak to, so give people a bit of a breakdown of what is getting the most gold, what type of things are getting a bit less, what's kind of lost out, and then maybe let's think about what the implications of that is. I'm going to share that for the people watching in, but you'll speak to it too.
Yeah, I think so. We looked at the chart just now in terms of what's been allocation based on points, and you'll see that some of these dApps have got quite a significant amount of gold, but actually the amount of TVL or open interest on the dexes or perp dexes and stuff like that would kind of dilute that a little bit. So it's just looking at what you think is abnormally weighted and what might be under farmed. So looking at the number of people that are using and the amount of capital they're deploying. So you got your likes of Thruster at the top. You got District 1, which is quite an interesting one because District 1, you don't necessarily need a lot of capital to do that. And I know the guy that's running the Pack Moon room, so Voltcoin, I think he's rank 1 in District 1. And I don't know what the allocation of gold is going to be for that second epoch, but I suspect he might do extremely well out of that. And he literally spends his whole time in that application. I think it's exactly the same for these other ones, whether you're talking about Kettle Finance earlier, like getting in early. I know Jen's an advisor for that. So like, I suspect she's had some know-how and been playing around with that as well, and obviously big into the Blast ecosystem. So I think picking a specific dApp and going deeper than anyone else, you'll find these individual niches within each of the games or whatever that you'll be able to then double down on and get ahead within that dApp. And actually, if you spent all of your time in that particular application or just a couple of them, accumulate like enough points to get to a certain level, you get some pretty significant payouts just on those alone. Like I know on Cambria, pit fights have just gone live again, and you can get essence points, which will then give you a Blast Gold allocation based on number of essence points, and that went live yesterday. So it's different. If you master that niche within that particular game, it then gives you a bigger advantage over those that are just kind of passive, passing through the ecosystem. So I completely agree with what Legendary is saying. If you find a specific application that you think is not necessarily, well, it's overlooked, and then just spend time getting to know it, understanding the mechanics, talking to the team, I think it could pay off within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, look, I think the key takeaway when it comes to strategic action, I think both of you are saying, and both of you are examples of, is like finding something that you're actually genuinely interested in and going deep into it. Like Sammy has been writing, I don't know if you were sharing it in your newsletter, Sammy, whether you're just sharing it on the timeline as well, like your Cambria analysis and discussion and whatever the content you were producing on that specifically was like really, really niche. And you can tell from the way that you're speaking about it that like, you know the ins and outs of that game and how to earn the gold. And ultimately, that is probably how people will be most successful, by like actually getting into the weeds and the mechanics of a specific thing. I wonder whether this is an open question, which maybe we'll come back to, but I wonder whether that's possible for anything. Like maybe one question before I go to NFT Stats' tweet, and then would love to hear from him as well on his reflections from the kind of new distribution. But I wonder whether you kind of have to go down the gold curve, because everyone wants to look at which dApps have the most gold, right? Initially, Legendary, maybe we'll come to you on this. Everyone wants to go to the dApps that have the most gold. Do you think it's actually wise to start looking down the curve and like figuring out a strategy for some of those lower ones? Because ultimately, still a lot of gold there. It's just not as much as Thruster, for example.
Yeah, I think there's two things in there. One, as you said, going down the gold curve, very, very good thing to do. And B, trying to find ways to deal with intransparency. Obviously, you talk about lazy capital, and if you want to compete with lazy capital, you need a shit ton of capital. And lazy capital is not only lazy, but it also likes to make informed decisions. So if you are on a platform where you know how the gold is going to get distributed, you know it's an easy mechanism, you provide an LP, and if you, 1% of all LP positions on Thruster, your assumption would be you get 1% of gold points. That's an easy to understand concept. Whereas with things that get a little bit more intransparent in how they're going to distribute gold and how they work, something like YOLO games, where they have more rake back mechanisms, different gold distributions, end of season airdrop, gold rush in between, a bit of RNG, which seems less predictable, but is perfectly predictable if you try to understand the model overall. Well, not cut perfectly, is understandable if you spend the time to deal with a bit more convoluted or a bit more apparently intransparent look of it. I think it's also worth it because it's typically the protocols that others shy away from using. It's the same point that I've been making about use a protocol that doesn't have a fixed gold allocation yet, because many people will be like, nah, I don't know what I will get out of there. Maybe there's a better way to spend my time or money, because this is a very clear set of rules and I can operate under that. then sometimes being able to take the risk and operate in a bit more unclear of an environment can pay off massively.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting perspective, like wanting to go into the darkness a little bit because you know other people aren't going to be there, and then maybe that kind of plays out in terms of a strategy. Stoop, I see you with your hand raised. Going to come to you in just a little bit. I want to get through NFT Stats' tweet. I'm just going to share some of his thoughts in case he doesn't have the tweet to hand, but then I'm going to throw to him to kind of get his headline thoughts after. So this is what NFT Stats shared on kind of reflections on the whole distribution. There seems to be 7 key thoughts here. So first, you can spend time on Blast betting on crypto, engaging socially, gaming and gambling. Social perps and gambling are heavily rewarded. That was interesting to see. Particularly, I felt gambling was always kind of rewarded, but the social aspect definitely seems to be getting pushed in this distribution. So that is interesting to see. Number 2, having a DEX with tons of liquidity is crucial, and Thrustify is being crowned as the place to do that. Remember, Thrustify is getting the most gold out of anyone, out of any DEX, out of any other DApp as well. So it seems to be that is the chosen one. Number 3, Blast loves models which uses native yield and balances instead of fees to generate revenue. Blaster XYZ does this in NFTs, and YOLO Games does this in gambling. Both got hooked up. Number 4, the number of gold receiving projects got bigly chopped. Slightly more gold was distributed, but only 70 projects got gold this time versus 140 last time. The big bang is over and a more focused approach from the team. I think that's important to note. Getting a bit more streamlined. Number 5, they said gold will be allocated to token and NFT projects on Blast via a new mechanism in the near future, separate from DApp Gold distributions. PacMoon, probably the biggest beneficiary, is stable at 7 cents. Number 6, they were much calmer about the Blast native score, not punishing Blast heavy projects with presence elsewhere. That is nice to see. I completely agree with that one. There was a strange thing happening last time where Wasabi, which everyone really, really likes, was getting not as much stuff simply because they existed on mainnet. That seemed like a bit of an unfair way to run things. And number 7, a few projects have got pretty juicy pushes, which is nice to see, but surprised me a bit. Orbit Lending, Bloom on Blast, and Trade on Blitz. And then if you're looking at the tweet, there's a whole list of the different categories and how much gold they got there. NFT Stats, welcome to the stage, Sam. How are you doing? How are you feeling? It's great to see you in Dubai this week. What are your thoughts on Blast here? Key reflections.
What is up from the Los Angeles airport where I'm on standby right now, so might have to hop any second. But no, I think everything, I mean, you know, I don't know if any of that there is like overly insightful, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if my thoughts have evolved too much from there. You know, when I did speak with Pac-Man about a month ago and talking about some other stuff, but one thing he said was that they wanted to be more like China than the USA, and what he was referring to was that China has like their chosen banks and their chosen insurance companies and their chosen steel company, and you know, in the US it's a bit more duke it out and see who wins, even though we have a ton of monopolies here as well. But I think you're seeing that play out a little bit, where you know, ambient finance, for example, got a big cut versus previous times, and that kind of the biggest competitor to Thruster. I think Thruster is just kind of crowned as the one. I think Thruster actually like is a decent place to earn gold, but the problem is like you can't just set and forget, because you end up taking, you know, I think that one of the things that's happening right now is for people who LP and liquidity provide, like there's so much demand for gold that you end up not really making much in fees because there's too much supply relative to the fee income, and you end up taking like, or at least I can speak for myself. I LP'd in a lot of these platforms, and I think the losses that I took, because ETH went from 3,600 to 3,200, you know, and when you LP, you end up getting long a ton of ETH as it goes down. Like, I think those losses I took actually were bigger than any gold will offset. So I think it's kind of like, I think like Thruster and the DEXs can be interesting if you're on gold, but there is a fair bit of risk there. Whereas with something like Wasabi, you're basically just like setting and forgetting and earning a fair bit of yield as well as everything else. And then you can always go the legendary way and find all the ways you can wash gamble and make more. So a lot of different approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting on the China point though. Like the fact that they'd rather select rather than kind of allow people to duke it out. Do you have any thoughts?
I think he was more saying like, I think he was just seeing the value in like, you kind of just want a place that people can go to swap USDB into ETH. Like you just want the best place to do that. And I think having one crown player like Thruster is like easier than like having that spread out. I think that's probably, they're positives and minuses. And I think that was his point.
Interesting. I think that's probably fair. Any reflection on the SocialFi push, Sam?
Well, I think like what is an L2, right? Like it's kind of a place that you go. I mean, it's an interesting place you can go to like do perp trading and put bets on and stuff like that. But none of that really like keeps you there in like a very meaningful way. Whereas, you know, District 1, like people were spending tons of time on District 1 and it was kind of becoming the place that they like, I don't know, like I find some people who are now in District 1 hard to reach because they're just constantly like on District 1. So I think I can see where I keep saying he as though Blast is just one person, but I can see where the team was like, okay, we want to get people to spend time using our apps. And I think the SocialFi ones are the ones that have been the most addictive. I mean, it is kind of like fantasy at its core is like an app that bets on how many likes someone's going to get on Twitter. You know, YOLO Games at its core is a coin flip game. Like literally the same tech that I'm sure like cavemen had some form of coin flip game where like something was binary and the winner got more money or food or whatever. Like the interesting thing is like these apps are like really not all that interesting at some level. They're just like kind of like fun little addictive things, but that's just kind of the state of the world we're in. So
yeah, really, really interesting stuff. I think that the SocialFi aspect could be really, really important because as you said, apps like dApps you can just use anywhere, but if they can create an atmosphere where people want to be socializing with each other on the place, then that would be a real use case which could potentially keep people. So that's definitely an interesting move. We'll monitor that as we go. Legendary, want to come to you for a final reflection, but I think we're going to go to Stoop first, who has their hand raised. Stoop, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on the Bast Gold distribution 2? Have you been using it? Have you got any strategies for us? What are your thoughts?
Good morning. Good morning. Happy Monday. I would say I am not farming Blast. I have not spoke about Pac Moon or anything happening on Blast Chain, just purely because it doesn't make sense to me, right? And I think as I've gotten my roommate, kind of adjusted to crypto, trying to have a conversation with her about Pac Moon and Blast and NFTs is a very convoluted and complicated conversation because she doesn't understand like what we're doing, right? But I can very easily get her onto Warpcast. I can very easily get her using Base. I can show her how to buy DGen. She doesn't have to trade the DGen, right? She just has to buy it to qualify for tips. And so I'm like fading Blast myself. And I think like on the main, as I'm taking positions or considering what I'm doing in this space for, let's say, this next 6 months, rather than focusing on technology aspects of the chains, I'm more focusing on user experience. And I think I've been, vocally against Runes publicly, and I've kind of been an asshole, I guess. But I think realistically, it feels as if we've lost the forest for the tree, and we all focus on, is NFTs dead? What L2 are we using? But in reality, retail will come in, and we need to think about user experiences. Is Runes the best meme coins in the market? I don't believe so, and I don't believe Blast is the best L2. Because I don't necessarily understand why I would need to bring up Pac Moon or Blast, because it's just one aspect of the entire market that's happening, when it's easier to talk about Base and Coinbase and like get people used to that, because realistically, like, that's where they're at. Although we here on these spaces may be much more exposed and much more used to it and know how to push the buttons, we need people to understand what buttons they're pushing as we bring new entrants into the market.
Interesting perspective. Yeah, fair enough. I think there's definitely one thing we've definitely noticed, and we've spoken about multiple times on the show, is how there's probably too many things going on for people to really get familiar with different ecosystems. And Base itself is definitely one of the ones where there's been like a good amount of community building and people have got very comfortable there. You talk about user experience. I think there's all kinds of fans of Farcaster in particular. So that social user experience is something that people have really been enjoying. And I guess there's probably, this would be my intuition, but I know Sammy wants to come in on this. I guess there's probably not a lot of crossover between like the Base and Blast crowd. So that would be my quick reflection there. Sammy, I know you wanted to come in on that too, and then we're going to have to move on to the final headline. Sammy first.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Base is a really interesting ecosystem purely from the distribution standpoint. Obviously, you've got like 100 million users on the exchange that could potentially come into there. So it makes sense. And I completely think that Base will do well. But I do think that this innovation around native yield with Blast is really interesting. It offers so many possibilities that you could integrate into, whether it's NFTs, whether it's different things. But I think the repatriating that gold or the fees back to the apps, it offers that additional revenue to incentivize that. And I've seen some really interesting protocols come through. So I think like Blitz, I get why they're doing it. I really like the one-click trading. It's a really seamless UI. It's really efficient. I compare that to Wasabi. It's not quite there yet. So I think like, and you look at that compared to Solana. So looking at Drift on Solana, that just wears at the moment. It just takes too long to execute a trade. So I think from the user experience, it depends on who's wanting to use the product at the moment. And I think the perp dexes and those kind of protocols are actually like what they're producing on Blast. I think it's really, really innovative. I do think that some of the games that are being built on there, like I'm obviously biased. I love Cambria. I think it's a really good game. It's RuneScape inspired, and I played that as a child. So like, I have that nostalgia, and I think they're executing really well. They've got a lot of funding. So I think there are products coming through, and I don't necessarily think they get the limelight they deserve. And I think 6 months from now, we'll probably end up seeing the fruits of those labors, of those all this native yield and stuff coming through. More people wanting to build on there, and I think it's going to gain a lot more traction post Blast airdrop. And Pac-Man's really good at continuing that incentivization, whether you do like multi-level marketing or whatever. But I'm interested to see where this goes. I don't think it's going to be one of those things in 2 months' time it's going to be dead. I think it's going to be around for a while.
Look, I mean, that's definitely why we are focusing on it so much. We do think that will be the case. And I take your point as well. The native yield thing is legitimately innovative. And it's kind of forgotten because people are focusing on the points all the time, the speculation, the gold, like, oh, look at these crazy incentives. Native yield. No one else has done that. Legit innovation on this L2. Look, we're going to get to the Web3 Roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space in the past 24 hours. Then we're going to hit the final headline on Runes, just to give you a quick update of what's going on there. As always, this is from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's do it. Web3 Roundup, number one, as we mentioned already, ZK Casino rugs for $30 million as user deposited ETH exchanged into worthless gas token without permission. Next, Frentech V2 launch scheduled for April 29th. Third, Noun's meme coin Nogs flips Noun treasury value. People are not super familiar with what's going on in the Nouns ecosystem, but this Nogs token has been released, and various NFTs in the Nouns ecosystem got an allocation. 4, OnlyFans for Solana. Only one announces a $1.3 million strategic raise. That'll be interesting to see and see who signs up. Next, Bats releases memes by Bats for keyboard holders, and the Pups, this was a couple of days ago, Pups releases tokenomics and confirms a 100-to-1 split to make it 1 billion tokens. That is the Web3 Roundup from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. We only have 5 minutes left today, so I think what we wanted to do was just touch on Runes, what's been going on there. It was obviously a big weekend with the halving. So a quick update, a little bit of a summary. Adam Hollander shared this, who's been a great trader that I've started to follow recently, and quite familiar with the ordinal stuff. He says it's obvious from comments that most people don't understand the significance of what's happening tonight. This was from a couple of days ago. He said in about 5 hours, essentially for the first time, people will be able to create meme coins on Bitcoin. There will be hundreds of tickers created, thousands. And that is basically what happened. There was all kinds of stuff created in that period of time. People tried to pay a lot of money for the first few. It appears to be the case that this Satoshi Nakamoto ticker is the most popular one at the moment. It was listed on Gate exchange, so that seems to be one that was received pretty well. And this is an interesting point that came up actually in the talk that I did at the Artstar Festival yesterday here in Dubai. I did a panel on ordinals, and they noted the fees that this was generating. So in the basically 4 complete meme coins that are hours old on Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, Meme Economics, the ticker is ELSA, and Uncommon Goods. Between these, 70,000 Bitcoin transactions were done at $300 each. This is information from Fred Krueger, our favorite Bitcoin bull. And he said that was $21 million in fees in 3 hours. And interestingly, it was corroborated in some way by the ordinal experts on the panel, where they were kind of framing this as like a really good thing. Like miners are going to have this incentive to do stuff because they're going to be making a lot of money, and it was kind of presented as a good thing. But in my head, and I want to go to Legendary after this, it was like, well, what, like, isn't that bad? Because the main thing that people always complain about on ETH is that it's too expensive and you have to pay too much gas. But it was kind of being framed, what I've noticed with ordinals, it's kind of being framed as like a good thing, that you need to give money to the miners so that you could do your stuff. So look, that's kind of what's been happening. Udi wrote a really long tweet, which maybe I'll just try to summarize in a bit. But Legendary, maybe just to come to you first, what are your reflections on the runes kind of explosion over the weekend, now that it's kind of settled down a bit? What's your thinking where we are at the moment?
There's one thing I find very amusing about runes, and this is the bull case for runes is centralization. We are bullish on runes because they get a listing on a centralized exchange. And that is happening on the greatest decentralized storage on Bitcoin. I find that quite hilarious. With that being said, I do have my set of runes. I did buy into Satoshi Nakamoto and some others. I do understand obviously also the need, as much as I find that entertaining, for like UI and the need for liquidity and being able to trade those things pretty quickly. I like that Liquidium is trying to integrate those and those runes as a means, as a way to borrow and lend against. In terms of where we are right now, it's so narrative driven, right? The same narrative, you mentioned it perfectly. We like to hate against ETH because fees are high on mainnet, but suddenly this is a feature on BTC because it's exclusivity. And I think that tells you that we're like early, not in terms of the price curve, no idea what's going to go on with the price in the future, nobody really has, but just in terms of the user base, we are early, because early ETH days, where we were a bit closer and when we had like the first gas spikes and we had the first NFT bull run, that was a feature because the gas price was high and that kind of got baked into the floor price. So you artificially raised floors. And once you see more people coming in, then you see L2s popping up. You see suddenly an argument being made for Base and other L2s because it's so cheap to transact there. And it needs to be competitive with Solana, which both are obviously more like evolved ecosystems, have more people onboarded. But in those early days, when it's more of an exclusive club of people using stuff, then fees are a bit of a feature. So that would be like my indication that we are like still early. But again, this is just in terms of like user base, user adoption, etc. No idea in terms of the price.
Interesting. So look, I think that's a very, very helpful summary. To be honest, it's not a million miles away from what Udi was saying. I told you he wrote this really long tweet kind of saying that, you know, just general thoughts on the Runes ecosystem as things stand. The only additional thing, interesting thing that he said, which you didn't say, is he said, sorry if this offends anyone, but I think the big one is going to be Runecoin. And that seems to be the one that people are picking. And we noted already that the Rune Stone had like plummeted in price from about 0.08 Bitcoin to down to 0.03. I think ultimately, like, people have realized that there's a hell of a lot of speculation going on here. And as Rudy goes on to say, and as I think you mentioned already, Legendary, there is like really no consensus and guarantee with any of these things at this point. There's been and this was the point I made in the talk yesterday, there's been way too much focus on Bitcoin and ordinals about like numbers and like, oh, we're gonna do the dog meme, or we're gonna get the 5th meme, we're gonna get the 7th meme, or we're gonna get top 10, we're gonna get top 3. It's like, that's not how culture kind of gets built, and that's not what makes people ape into it. Like, if you get the 7th out of 10 or the 7th out of 10,000, like, that's not a good enough reason for someone to buy the ticker. It's going to have to be like funny, it's going to have to be interesting, it's going to have to be cool, it's going to have to grab their attention some other way. So I do think that's something to bear in mind. But otherwise, yeah, a lot of speculation at this point. Sammy, want to give you a quick chance to come in on it. We are drawing to the close of the show, so we're running out of time, but any quick take here on just the Runes ecosystem?
I don't know. I think looking at the wider ecosystem of meme coins, I think there's so many of them. It does make me a little bit concerned that there will be very few winners. Like, you look on Solana, you've got Whiff, Bohm to an extent, and a few others. Same on ETH. Same. I think Bitcoin's probably going to be the same. I think a lot of people will get burned. I just don't know at this point. It's tough to say which one's going to be that winner. But I do think that even though it is that centralized standpoint of, okay, which ones are being listed first, if you can get that to the masses first and distributed to a wide range of retail users, then all of a sudden that's got a bit of a head start. So I kind of get why they're trying to race to that.
Yeah, look, I think that is actually the ultimate reality, though, right? Like, you're saying you're concerned that there'll only be a few winners. Like, that's just the reality of all of this stuff all the time. So I think that's completely valid. One thing that will almost certainly be a winner, I don't know if people can see this because they might not be on YouTube, whatever brainstorming is going on between Sammy and Tiro for the OnlyFans that is going to be produced, hopefully not sponsored by the modern market, that seems to be a real winner. In the comments on YouTube, I'm not going to read it out though, because it is not for public consumption. But guys, that is the end. Pretty raunchy. That is the end of the show. Hope you enjoyed the show today, Monday, 22nd of April. Reminder, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT every day of the week. We discuss all things to do with the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to, in an ideal world, make just a little bit of extra money on the side. Thank you to my co-host Legendary and Sammy. Thank you to our speakers, NFT Stats, Bread, Oxy, Funky, and Stoop. Apologies, see your hand raised, Stoop. Couldn't get to you again. Hopefully we can get you in another time on the show this week. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.